Welcome again to History B352, Europe in the High and Later Middle Ages. This is Week 1, Lecture 1, Introduction. The High and Late Middle Ages, so what? I think is the title of this. Let me just check real quick here. Yes, indeed. The High and Late Middle Ages, so what is the question for this lecture. Now, if you look at the syllabus, as I'm hoping you already have, you will also see that the very last lecture, week 15, lecture 2, has the title So What as well. Now, the point there is, why is this course important? Why do we bother studying the Middle Ages? What's it all about? Now, in some ways, the answer to that question won't be until week 15, lecture 2, the so what question, which was the wrap up question. But here I just want to pose it to begin with to set the stage for the course. And that's what this lecture is really about. It's an introduction to the course. Um, and we'll be going through the structures of the course, the assignments, that sort of mundane things. Um, and I hope you have already looked at the syllabus, and especially I hope that you already have or will read the introduction to the course, because in some ways this lecture is a distillation of the introduction to the course document. And so there's more information there that I believe that you will find helpful or need to know. Um, and so this is, again, setting the stage. This lecture and then the following lecture, week 1, lecture 2, is setting the stage for how do we approach the Middle Ages, because it's difficult. The Middle Ages is a foreign territory, so to speak, and often it becomes popularized in the media in very strange, odd ways, um, and that's really not the case. So we will be looking at some of those aspects today, but then throughout this course, in terms of how to approach it, how to conceive it, um, how to come into it to start studying it, and why we're studying it. Those are the aspects there. But to begin, we're going to deal with some of the practicalities. And here I'll then turn to the first slide, which is the nature of the course. Now, the nature of the course could be almost anything, if you want to say it. It's a 100% asynchronous online upper division history course. Um, what does that mean? That means that um, you have to take more responsibility uh, than you do for an in-person course. Now, in some ways, that is simply responding to a perception out there, because an in-person course, you still have to take responsibility. And I'll be talking maybe a bit more about that in terms of my responsibilities and your responsibilities. But you need to manage your time to stay on track, to get the work done, to submit the assignments on time, that is when they're due, uh, and to recognize that you are responsible for your own learning. I'm responsible for giving you the best course that I possibly can, and to help you in any way that I can in that learning process to understand the course and to grasp the course concepts and ideas and pieces of information. But it's your responsibility to actually do the work and to perform in this course and to kind of, let's say, get what you're paying for. What you're paying for in your tuition is not a knowledge or understanding of Europe in the High and Late Middle Ages, but it's paying for the opportunity to learn that, the opportunity to go out and get it. And I'm here to help with that, as well as to present you, again, the best course that I feel like it can present you. I'll be saying more about that later. But this course, then, too, has a lot of reading and writing in it. And it's a challenging course. It's not easy. It's another thing that is sometimes, I know students think, oh, online it'll be easier. No, it's not. Um, in some ways, it's more difficult. It's just a different medium of offering the course. And I try to make that as similar to an in person class experience as possible. So I have these videoed lectures of my lectures. Um, but it's a challenge. And the amount amount of reading and writing is a challenge. And so just need to prepare yourself for that. Now the readings, if you again have looked at the syllabus and or have read the introduction to the course, there are two books you need to purchase. One is the textbook for the course, um, William Jordan's Europe in the High Middle Ages, and the other is the Romance of the Rose, the translation of that with the Oxford Classical World Classics text. All the other readings are provided to you on Canvas. They're posted in the module readings and in the week that they're assigned. Now, there's also this first um, part of the course, another textbook that's being assigned, and that is my textbook that I'm working on. Still, it's a draft, a Word document draft for Western civilization called The Myth of the West. And that is assigned because there are no real prerequisites for this course. Even as this course is based upon the subject matter of another course I teach at times, Europe in the early Middle Ages, which is approximately Europe from approximately 500 to 1000. And this is then 1000 to 1500, breaking it up. And that course is also based on, the later antique period or the period of late antiquity with the so-called fall of Rome, etc. And we can't really come to understand the material that is covered in this course without having some understanding of that earlier time in development. So, therefore, I thought, okay, I will assign this Western Civ book. If you haven't had, uh, let's say, Western Civ at all, or if you haven't had, B351, the earlier, later Middle Ages, um, to give you some background to it. Now, that also means that this, in some ways, first part of the course, which I believe is the first 4 weeks, is on the background. And there's a fair amount of reading for that. And the first midterm will cover all of that because we need to have a good foundation from which to start dealing with the course material itself. Otherwise, there'll be too much confusion, too much lack of understanding, et cetera, et cetera. So, this course, too, this first part of the course covering the earlier periods, so to speak, I'll be talking about periodization in history in the next lecture, um, helps set the stage. Okay, because we can't understand Europe in the high late Middle Ages unless we understand some of the basic concepts that have been developed up until approximately the year 1000, when things really begin to change, as we'll talk about after the first midterm, and even talk about it before the first midterm in terms of looking forward where the course is going. So that is what we're getting at. And to understand all of this and why and how, there are two then types of readings, almost signified by the two books you have to publish, the two books you have to purchase, Jordan's the Europe in the High Middle Ages, and then the Romance of the Rose. There are the readings of the textbooks, Myth of the West and Jordan, and then some other essays that I've written, like for week one is assigned as history, religion, myth, and theology, or something like that. There are assigned readings that you're responsible for and form part of the course material. I'll be saying more about that in a second. And then there are the primary documents. And the primary documents are ones that allow us to say anything about the past. I'll be talking more about this again next lecture in terms of how do we understand what the discipline of history is and how do we approach it and what does it all mean. Because the past does not exist. We cannot really go back and analyze Europe between the years approximately 1500 CE. We can't do that because it doesn't exist anymore. What we can analyze are the sources that are still extant that signify that which no longer exists. So therefore, the sources, the source material, the primary documents, are very important because they also give you the opportunity to challenge what I say. or what anyone else says about the Middle Ages. And in some ways, I'm assuming, and I'm aware that assuming is a problem, and that's what I argue against, that we should be not be assuming. But I'm assuming that the general assumption out there, so to speak, in the popular mind, is very unhistorical regarding the High and Later Middle Ages, or the Middle Ages as such. So that is my assumption in terms of my arguing against, I'm assuming, what is, let's say, the common understanding out there. So if you've already studied the Middle Ages or the earlier Middle Ages or something, you may already not need this argument against the common opinion out there. But it is, in many ways, what the course is about, because we need to come to an understanding of what the Middle Ages as such, and especially then in the High and Late Middle Ages, of the importance of it for the rest of the development of the Western tradition, which is still with us today. Now, there are two types of primary source document readings: the required readings and then the suggested readings. The exams, as I'll be talking about shortly, and the assignments, are based on the course material. The course material consists of the lectures and all the assigned readings. The basis of my grading your midterms, the term paper, and the final is how well you apply the course material to the problems given you. I'll be saying more of that about that as we go along too. But this is not an abstract question of, is it right or wrong in an absolute sense, but this is simply based on the course material, the basis for your grading. So therefore, two, you don't need to do any other reading. You don't need to do any other research. You don't need to use any other sources or resources other than what is assigned in this course. Now, I'll come back to that maybe in a bit too, because since this is an online 100% asynchronous course, all of the assignments are quote unquote open book, and you can use other resources, but I'll address that shortly. The suggested readings are just that, meaning in terms of your grades, if you do not mention any of the suggested readings in your midterms or final or term paper, that will not prevent you from achieving the highest grades possible. If you do mention some of them and cite them appropriately and use them appropriately, that could help your grade. I don't know if that makes sense, but the thing is, when I grade, and I'll be talking more about this shortly with the assignments, I don't have a checklist. I go through and boop, 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 boop. Okay, oh yeah, mention that, mention that, mention that. For the essay questions, I'm kind of jumping ahead talking about the assignments, but it's related here. For the essay questions on the midterms and the final, there are no right or wrong answers. You can get things right or wrong, but there are no right or wrong answers. There are good answers and bad answers. Good answers are answers that incorporate as much of the assigned course material as possible. It's impossible to relate all of it. So what do you select out from it to deal with the problem given you in the confines of the time that you have? And so that is what this is kind of getting towards in terms of the course material and what your grades are going to be based on. And so the suggested readings are not required, in that they will not be a basis for your grade, in that I won't say, oh, you didn't talk about, one of the suggested readings. That's not a negative. If you do talk about it, it could be a positive. I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, please just ask again, because this is an important thing. As I said, there is a lot of reading, and I don't really apologize for that. I'm happy to try to help you through it. But it is then how to approach it all. And the suggested readings are also ones that I will be addressing and talking about in the lectures. And in that sense, they are part of the course material. I mean, if we look at the syllabus, I'm just going to check because I think I know what the things are. Yes, Pope Leo I, the Petrine Doctrine, just posted on Canvas, is one of the suggested readings for this week, or is it next week? I should have even looked. I will be talking about that. It must be next week. I'll be talking about that next week. And so, to the extent that I talk about that document in my lectures, it's part of the course material because the lectures are. But you are not required to read the document. Now, that document, papal documents or whatever, again, whatever the title is, Leo I, Petrine Supremacy, is a selection of available source material translations that are on the web. I give the reference there to the Fordham Medieval Source Book. And you're welcome to read it. You're welcome to cite it. And you're welcome to say, well, Sachs said in his lecture, blah, 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 blah. But when we actually look at the document, we see that is not the proper use of this document because what the document actually says is X, Y, and Z, and blah, blah, blah. You can use it that way. Now, I hope that distinction is clear. So, I mean, it's a challenge, this course, because of the course material, because of the amount of reading, the amount of writing, and also the level of analytical thinking that is required, because this is not simply learning information. Now, there's some of that there on the midterms. You will see the first part of the midterms, both of the midterms, are identification of terms, and that is information. But what is really important is the understanding, and that is designed to be evident then in your essays on the midterms, and then on the final, and then on the term paper. Because it's that understanding that is so important. If this were simply about information, you wouldn't be needing to listen to my lectures. You wouldn't be needing to really do the readings. You could look up pieces of information and memorize them and recount them on an exam, and that would be that. And we could all be, easily done with this very quickly. The course material is my material. I'm not here to help you learn the course material. I'm here to teach you my understanding, my perspective, my experience based on my knowledge of the documents that signify this period. This is one of the areas that I specialize in. So it's something I do know a fair amount about. And to help you grasp it and deal with it, because dealing with a foreign culture is a challenge. We have to think about it. We have to analyze it. We can't just say, oh, I like this, or I don't like this, or this is right, or this is wrong, and blah, 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 blah. We have to say, why is it that way? Why are they doing things this way? Why don't they do it the way I think they should be done? Or why don't they do things the way we do things? Or how could they have been so, idiotic that they thought this and that and that? We have to not just dismiss and judge, but we have to evaluate and analyze to come to a new understanding. And that's what this course is about with respect to the developments in European culture, society, politics, intellectual history, social life between approximately 1000 and 1500. And then 2, you need to question yourselves and also be willing to challenge yourselves, to ask yourself, why do I think this about the Middle Ages? Why do I think this and have thought this? What's behind it? And what difference is this course making in my own perception, not only of this chronological period, but also of me today? Because all history, let me talking more about this next lecture, all history is about the present. And we say, oh, the history is about the past. No, it's about the present. Past is dead and gone. We use it as a shorthand, as a title, as a label. What is the subject matter of this course? Europe in the High and Later Middle Ages. It's a lot easier than saying, well, it's based on Professor Sachs' lectures, his own areas of expertise. It's based on these documents. It's based on these readings. How do you give that a title? It's then this category that we put together artificially, construct, and say, oh, here's a great course, Europe B352, history of medieval Europe in the High and Later Middle Ages, or something. That's. But again, I'll be talking more about that next lecture. So, if we look at the course material and look at the assignments are all geared to test your understanding of the course material. And if you see there, again, this is all in the syllabus and the introduction to the course, there are 2 midterms, a term paper, and a final exam. I've already mentioned that the midterms include terms, identification of terms. I talk more about this in the introduction to the course document in terms of what's expected for those identification of terms. They're very brief. Think of them as vocabulary words. And there's the list of terms to know for midterm 1 and midterm 2. Sorry, I forget if I also did a list of terms for the final. I don't think I did. I think the final is just one essay question. But there may be a list of terms to know for the final too. Again, my apologies for that, that I don't remember on my course that I've set up. Well, I mean, actually including. Anyway, the point being, for the midterm and final, this list of terms to know are the terms that are on the midterm. That does not mean that you only need to know these 20 terms. And so if you learn these 20 terms, like 20 vocabulary words, you can do fine on the exam. You would do fine on part 1 of the midterms. If you know those 20 terms as vocabulary words, so to speak, you have them down, you will do fine on part 1. Part 2 is how you use those. And in part 2, there are far more terms to know, so to speak, than the list of terms to know examined in part 1. Now, again, if you have any question about this, if it's not clear, please just shoot me an email and ask, because this is essential. I want you to understand what you're being asked to do, what you're being required to do, because it's the issue of information, and we hear so much today in our world today about information transfer. Information transfer is quote unquote easy. I could send you things on Canvas. That's transferring information that I have to your accessibility of it. You can read the book I suggest. That's information transfer. You can know, the chronological dates of things, which actually we'll be talking more about next lecture too. It's far more problematic than it may seem. But we have these dates seemingly that are factual. 1000 CE to 1500 CE. You can know the dates of things, and that is all well and good. That's information. The question is, what do we do for it and do with it? Yeah, not for it, but what do we do with the information that we have? That's the key to life. We know a lot of things. We're bombarded with information. What do we do with it? How do we apply it? How do we analyze and evaluate it? Now, that too is something that AI cannot do. If you look at the syllabus and at the introduction to the course, I hope I'm very clear that the policy for this course is any use of AI is not allowed. It's considered to be cheating and then subject to the penalties of cheating. If this were an in-person course, we'd be having Blue Book in-class exams. But it's not. I realize that. And I know it's difficult too, because of all the talk about AI and how even our university, is pushing the use of AI. And AI has some viable uses. It's not for the liberal arts, though. Reading and writing is not something that AI can do. Oh yes, you can ask it to write a paper for you, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever. You can ask them to write things for you. It doesn't think. It puts things all together, and it's an amazing thing that it does that, but it does not think and analyze. Detecting the use of AI is easy. It may not seem that way, but it is. So don't use it. The point of the terms is not just to Google the terms and then use that definition, whatever it might be, or to ask Copilot what the definition is, and then to use that definition. It is to use the definitions of those terms given in the course material, the lectures and the textbook. And that's why, too, on those midterms, you have to give precise reference of where you're getting your information, where you're getting your definition or identification, citing the page numbers of the books, textbooks, and or my lectures. AI can't do that. I don't want to go on an extensive harangue against AI and usage of it in the course. But don't use Grammarly. Don't use. You can use spell check. You can also go to the writing center. At least if you're anywhere near the Indianapolis campus, and use the writing center. You can send me drafts of your midterms and finals and term papers. And if you send me a draft, and if there's AI use in it that I can detect, that's okay. It's a draft. I'll say, this seems to be AI. Don't do it. Okay? And if you do it and what you finally submit, then it's the problem. But on a draft, it's not a problem. Same thing with any kind of plagiarism. You were to send me a draft that was completely, cut and pasted from the web, I would be able to tell that, say, no, this is plagiarized. You cannot do this. You need to write it yourself. But for a draft, you will not be penalized if you send me a draft that there are problems in it. You will be penalized if you submit officially in Canvas an assignment that's based on cheating, cutting and pasting from the web, using AI of any sort. That will be the problem. So just simply don't do it. Now, that being said, I hope the term paper is based on my book that is still coming out. It's in production. And the proofs are posted for you because it gets at, let's say, the overall theme of this course in some ways is questioning the very traditional assumption out there that the Middle Ages was an age of faith. People didn't think for themselves. People weren't even really individuals. They just did what they were told by the Pope. They believed, and that was that. That is about as far from the historical reality as possibly can be. So that is why the focus here is kind of on the Middle Ages as an age of reason, which too is a descriptive term. There's not a right or wrong answer. In some ways, it's not right or wrong to say that the Middle Ages was an age of faith. It depends on what you mean by it. I'll be talking a lot more about this as we go along. But that too is part of this course, and the midterms are designed to help with the final, and the term paper is designed to help with the final, and it all builds together. And so, too, I don't think this is explicitly stated in the introduction to the course, but my grading policy is for the midterms and the final. Term paper is separate. If you do better on the final exam than you do on one or both midterms, your final exam score will replace one of your midterm scores. Now, what I mean by that is percentage-wise, because the final is worth 40% of the grade, and the midterms are each worth 20% of the grade. But let's say on midterm 1, you receive, out of 20 points, you receive 12, which is a D. And on midterm 2, you receive 17 points, which is a B+. And on the final, you receive Out of 40 points, uh, is it? Yeah, out of 40 points, you'd receive um, 38 points, which is an A. That percentage of 38 out of 40 would be then used to recalculate your midterm scores out of 20. Does that make sense? Again, if it doesn't, ask. So the whole point is to gear towards the final. It's to help you prepare for the final. The midterms are essential because they are building blocks to the final and contribute to the final exam. So does the term papers. It's a little bit of a different assignment and approach, but they all work together. That's at least by design how this is all fitting together in terms of the course. Let's see here. We have the term paper, the final exam, and there's a guide to writing the midterms. There's a guide to writing the term paper. There's a guide to writing the final exams. Those are all documents too that you need to know and to read because they give you the instructions of how to go about doing this assignment. If you don't follow the instructions, what does that tell me when I go to grade your essay? It tells me you don't care. You're not paying attention. You don't care. And if you don't care, why should I? All of this is not being too paternalistic, at least in my view. It is not being too elementary or pedantic. It is simply being professional. Because if you have a professional job out there somewhere, or really any kind of a job, and if your boss tells you to do X, Y, and Z, and if you don't, you feel, I didn't bother listening to your instructions. That's not going to work very well. If your boss gives you a deadline and says, I want you to do X by, this given date, and if you don't, unless you can give a very good reason for not meeting that deadline, that also is not very good. So the whole point is to be professional. Now, if you look at that next slide, I think it is. No, it's not yet. This is the last slide. Be professional. I'll come back to that when we get there. But in terms of the assignments, approach this course in some ways as a job. I hope it's something that you enjoy and get a lot out of. I hope it causes you to question, to learn, and that's all things you can share. Which, if you have a job, you probably shouldn't do that with your boss. If your boss says, I want you to do this, if you have a really difficult time doing it, don't know how to do it, you shouldn't go back to your boss and say, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? No, you go to somebody else. Here, you can go to me with those questions. Okay? That's what I'm here for, to help you. The goal is understanding and learning. There's an old saying, I'm not sure who said this first. It's a man's mind. This was before the age of inclusion, so really a human being's mind. Stretched by a new idea can never return to its original dimension. Whether it's agreed to or not, whether you agree with it or not. It's expansion. That is education. That is being led out of our understanding at one point in time to a new understanding at a subsequent point of time. That's what education is all about. It's from the Latin educare,